Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim wa salatu wa salamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursaleen. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, viewers. My name is Sumayya Hassan and welcome to Aspire. In today's show, I would like us to talk about how to prepare for an interview. Many times when we are job hunting, we spend a lot of time applying for jobs, engaging our different networks. Once we are called for that interview, how should we prepare for it so that we try and give the very best impression of ourselves to the potential employer? I'd like to share several points on this issue. The first point: before the interview, do some research on your potential employer. Do they have a website? Go onto the website, read about them, read about their clients, read about their products, read about their services. Now, remember that your goal is not only to learn about what they do and what services they offer, but you also want to learn about how do they see themselves. This is very important because in the interview, during the conversation, when you sound like you get it, like you get your employer, you understand what they're about, you get a sense of what their aspirations are, what their hopes are, and how you would fit into that organization, it also helps you make your answers relevant to them. And an employer doesn't want a cut and paste type of approach. So when you look like you've invested time to understand the business of your employer, this creates a good impression that you are somebody who goes out of their way to take extra initiative in trying to understand whatever issue you may be dealing with at that particular moment. The second issue in helping to prepare for the interview is thoroughly digging into the job description. If the job description is posted online or in whatever other media, wherever you have found it, don't respond just on the basis of the title. They are recruiting for XYZ position, and you believe that either because you've done that before, or you think you fit into what your understanding of that is, you quickly send off your application. No, thoroughly review the job description. Go through it in detail to really understand what it is that they are asking, what are they looking for, and then highlight what experience do you have, which skills do you have, which would fit in, not only to just perform that job, but to excel. This is what you want to do. So prepare before, and when you come to the interview, part of your preparation should be a list of concrete achievements you have that are relevant to the position you're interviewing for. So again, write this down. Concrete examples from your past that show how you have dealt with a similar situation that perhaps you think you will face in this job. Also, challenges that you may have faced in your past that you think may be similar in this industry, in this company, or in this particular job. How did you tackle them? All this helps to reflect how you would behave should you be given that job. So this is very important in preparing for the interview, that you have your own list, about 4 or 5 very concrete examples. Sometimes in an interview, the applicants become very general and they talk about and then we did, and you'll find an employer asking you, what did you do? What was your input as an individual? So be very clear. Don't ride on the success of other team members. And maybe the only thing you did is that you shared the same office as the people who actually delivered. Be very clear and concrete in your contribution as an individual to the achievement of those particular successes. Okay, the third thing that you should do in preparing for a job, write down the list of questions you think you may be asked. There are certain questions that very likely you will be asked in an interview. Write down that list. At the same time, write down your answers to those questions. So, for example, you almost always will be asked, if you are in a current job, why do you want to leave? What are your skills? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? And a number of questions along those lines. What do you know about our company? Write down your answers. When you do that, after you've written your answers, practice them. Read them out aloud. If you have somebody that you can do a mock interview with, read them out to that person. All this reflection on the job description and the questions that you think you'll be asked, and practicing of your answers, by the time you get to the interview, your answers will have substance. Sometimes when you're being asked and you're thinking about it on the job, trying to craft answers, very spontaneously, it doesn't always come out the way you would want it to come out. Then after you go and think about it and you say, oh, I wish I had said this. I wish I had remembered this point. So write it down, write your answers down, prepare. And the other thing that preparation helps you with, you appear much more polished, you appear very confident. This works in your favor during your interview. So that's the third point. The fourth point in helping you to prepare for interview, ask yourself, what are you very nervous about being asked? What do you not want them to ask you? Maybe it's not in your CV, but especially if you are in a certain industry, and depending on what that issue is, it could be very sensitive for you. So the way to prepare for this is to assume the one thing you really don't want to be asked, that you will be asked. Maybe you were fired in a previous job, for example. You don't want anybody to ask you about that. What you should do in preparing for the interview, assume that they will ask you about that thing that you are most nervous about. Now, having assumed that, prepare your answer, write it down, and then read it out to yourself. Read it out to whoever it is who's helping you prepare for this interview, and see, you'll get to a certain point where you feel, I'm comfortable with this answer. I think it explains my situation very clearly, very factually, and also explains, my input in this, whatever steps I took, maybe to learn out of the mistake I made, and makes you look like a person who is very authentic. So prepare, don't run away from it. Do not use hope as your strategy. I hope they will not ask me about, and then they ask you. And you spend your whole interview looking nervous, and maybe they don't ask you about it, but the sense you leave your interviewer with is, that person was so nervous. I wonder what they were hiding. Don't. So just be very comfortable because you've prepared about that issue that you are nervous about. Okay. The fifth thing, in preparing for the interview, come up with questions of your own. In many interviews, at the end, the interviewer will ask you, do you have any questions that you want to ask us? Now, this is a very useful point in the interview for various reasons. Number one, it gives an interviewer an opportunity for them to see that you really have spent time trying to understand them, understanding the sector, and it can really help create a very positive impression about you depending on the questions you ask. So think very carefully about what questions would you ask if you are given a chance. Don't squander this opportunity by being very petty in the type of questions that you're asking. The other thing as well is that this is an opportunity for you to get the information that you need. Because remember, the interview is really both ways. Your employer is trying to figure out, do they want you to go and work for them? But you are also trying to figure out, do I want to come and work with you? So ask the questions. What are the things that a typical work day looks like? What are the type of objectives that you would be expected to meet? What is the career path of this position like? What are some of the challenges a person in that position would be expected to face or has faced in the past? So ask the questions that also help you to understand whether you want to work in that environment. And remember, no one is asking you to memorize your questions. Write them down and pull out wherever it is that you've written them down, your gadget, your tab, whatever it is, and ask your questions so that you don't live there thinking, I wish I had asked this. That is your chance to also give yourself an opportunity to understand whether or not you want to work with that organization. And finally, the sixth point I want to share, get yourself into the right state of mind. Now, what does getting yourself into the right state of mind mean? Before an interview, you know yourself well. Are you one of those people who, if you haven't had a good night's sleep, you don't perform very well the next day? Then make sure you sleep well. Get to bed nice and early so that you're fresh the next day. If you're one of those people who must have, their breakfast before they go for such an interview, then don't skip breakfast. Unless you're fasting, of course, on that day. But, know yourself and the things that get you into a positive frame of mind so that you're nice and early. If you know that you're on a road that perhaps is very unpredictable in terms of traffic or has a lot of, obstacles, maybe there are road repairs, don't assume that on that day everything will be okay. Give yourself extra time, that even if there was an accident on the road, even if there is more traffic than usual, that you still arrive there in good time so that you don't get there, you're huffing and puffing, you're sweating, you're late, you're creating a negative impression, you're so nervous you forget. Yeah, so prepare. The other thing as well is that there are certain people who get very nervous before job interviews. If you know that you are one of those people, there are certain pointers that you may want to remind yourself to help you become less nervous. Number one, remember that the employer would not invite you for the interview if they didn't think you have the qualifications that they're looking for, or that at least they think there's a high probability that you would be able to have those qualifications. They would not call just anybody else. So give yourself that comfort. They are inviting you for the interview because they think you probably have the skills they're looking for. Now, secondly, also remind yourself to help you become less nervous. The other candidates, your competitors, are not perfect either. So hardly will anybody come in and give a completely perfect interview. If it's not the one thing, it will probably be the other. So relax, The people coming for the interview are humans like you. They haven't started interviewing robots as far as I know, so you don't have that competition to worry about. And they are not perfect, and neither are you. So what you are called upon to do is to give your best, to show how your skills, your experience, your competencies will help you excel at the job you're being interviewed for, and to also give an opportunity for your potential employer to understand what would you be like to work with every day. So be authentic, because this is somebody bringing you into their work family. They want to understand, will you fit in? Will you fit in with the other people there? So be authentic. Give the very best version of yourself. And finally, one other pointer that you may want to think about is think of the interview as really a collaborative business meeting between you and your potential employer, where both of you are looking at whether it will make sense for the two of you to work together. Will it make sense for them? Will it make sense for you? And so you're partners in that process. If you think of yourself as a partner in that process, as opposed to that you are the one, they have the upper hand, you are the lower hand, it will make you much less nervous and make you much more confident and much more pleasant to engage with, because you will also be much more relaxed. Ladies and gentlemen, that is our session for today. I look forward to receiving your feedback on any of our social media handles that will be streaming at the bottom of your screen. Until next time, in another session of Aspire. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.